going to get from 280 Trumbull to her office.
She better be on her phone. She just joined from downstairs.
She was like, I'm going to go back. I'm like, okay.
Okay. Okay, just so you know, the link is in board docs. So whenever we have more people join and you're ready to begin, Jen, go right ahead. Or Chairperson Akinhole.
Okay. I think we can just go ahead and get started, if that's okay. So welcome everyone to the January 7th, 2025 Legislative and Advocacy Task Force meeting tonight. Thank you everyone for joining us virtually, and those of you watching at home, we're grateful for your interest. Tonight's agenda includes just an update from Capital Strategies. The legislative session, I believe, starts tomorrow. So this is really just kind of a kickoff to that. We'll get some updates on priorities from the district, if there are any to share. And then we just thought we could have some open discussion around any new ideas that have come up since the last time we met, any organizations in which you're involved in that you might think that we should advocate with or talk to further. That would be great. So just kind of an open forum for the last part of the meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Patrick. Great, thank you.
You're on mute, Pat.
That's not a very good start. My apologies. Good evening, everyone. That's right. This is session eve. We're kicking off the session tomorrow. I'm joined by my partner, Nicole Tomasetti from Capital Strategies. Thought we could just give you just a very quick overview. As you know, I think you all have seen the toolkit, and I won't go through the schedule for the session. Some of you are very aware of it anyway from past sessions or other things that you do. But that is in the toolkit. It's a long session, and it will be driven primarily. Most of the issues will be driven primarily by the budget, which of course is what is going to drive Hartford Public Schools legislative agenda as well. In terms of education issues, obviously the department, State Department has a pretty robust agenda that I think you've all seen. There is a new committee on special education. And there will be, I think, and maybe Pedro or I see the superintendent may discuss the priorities that have been suggested for the session, which will involve two significant priorities involve special education funding. We will be calling on many of you, we hope, through this organization to advocate alongside the superintendent, other members of her staff and board. And that would be really helpful, and we're looking forward to that. And I think the toolkit will shortly have uploaded to it some key dates in the timeline for advocacy. And you'll be able to take a look at that and see where we'd like to plug you in. Most of it will start towards the end of this month as the governor gets ready to unveil his budget. He'll do a state of the state tomorrow. There may be some education initiatives he's going to discuss that could impact the district. But we certainly are, looking forward to seeing what he's going to propose in February in the biennial budget. I think with that is really the update. As we move forward in the session, there will certainly be more detail and more activity by you all, we hope.
Thanks, Patrick. Talking about calling on folks to help, how do you plan to do that? Would it be helpful if we had a list that had like our areas of expertise on it, or what organizations are with, or would you just like to send out an email to the whole group and say, this is what we're working on, can you help? Like, how does that work for us?
So maybe I'll turn to Nicole a little bit on that. I know that people have been asked to submit some bio information in the toolkit. I will admit I have not gone through that yet, but certainly that there may be things that if people have done that we might see there may be an expertise depending on who we want to meet with and on what issue. But I think that it would generally, Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, we as long as we have the contact information, those requests would probably go generally to the group. You think so, Nicole?
Yeah, yeah, I think ideally, we've discussed this before, but sometimes the legislative timeline can be kind of tight, right? So they might tell us that there's a hearing in 5 days, and not all of you obviously will be able to mobilize and get prepared or even attend a hearing in 5 days. So I think ideally, yeah, we share it with everyone. If there's someone like Patrick said from your bio, we can reach out separately and say, hey, we really think you could bring something to the table with this. But I think ideally I would just email probably everyone on Christina's email list and provide the information. And then you guys could reach out and say, hey, I do want to participate in this. But of course, if that works for all of you.
That's great. Thank you. I will, before I turn it over to the superintendent, are there any questions so far? Thank you, everybody, for joining. I see everybody's kind of trickling in, so thank you for joining.
There is a question in the chat, just so you see. Well,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Tatum, the new committee on special education is chaired by Hartford Public Schools' own Miriam Khan, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
I think, yes, she was with us last year, and I think is Bloomfield? No, East Hartford,
She moved.
working in East Hartford Public
Yeah.
Schools, I think.
And-
But
and-
yes, she was with us
I
last
think
year.
the district has a piece of Windsor and Hartford, I think.
And that's where, yeah, my mind is going. Okay,
Yep.
great. I see several others jumped in, so I'm gonna back to you, chairperson, to see.
I don't see any other questions, so superintendent, I'll just turn it over to you.
Yes, I think the wanted to offer a couple suggestions, and then I think Pat, maybe, and Nicole, you kind of guide us around. We know that there are the big buckets, right, around general ed tuition and special ed funding formulas and all of that. But I wonder if there are things that we can also request or suggest, advocate for, like full service community schools funding, which is doesn't come through ECS, but there might be some other funding stream or opportunity at the state level. And so I don't know if that's appropriate for me to lift as a potential separate list. So there were a few things that I had on my mind, like our community schools, which is right about $2 million. Our college and career readiness, the pathways partnership that we have with Ready CT. I know there should be some funding set aside. We'll learn more tomorrow, maybe, from the governor around workforce readiness.
Mhm.
And I know there's a strategy emphasis at the state level to align secondary education with, the CT state college system. And so I'm wondering if that's another ask that we can have that doesn't only align to ECS. And then there are others that I think we could put on the list, smaller asks around teacher, our pipeline efforts.
Mhm.
So that's really those are some of the ideas that I have, and I just didn't know if it was appropriate to create one whole list or one list of the big asks that align with all the other that we know, right? Everyone else is also advocating for special ed, the weights, all of that.
Yep.
But these
No,
other Hartford specific asks.
Sure. I think it's very appropriate. You're going to be we'll be working with a coalition of other districts, as you know, on ECS, making sure that stays the same on both weighting, not only fully funding, but potentially getting some kind of weighted special education in ECS, which would make a huge difference. There are four, I think you've got four big priorities. I think it's perfectly appropriate, and it should be on the same list though. When we're talking to our delegation, when you're talking to leaders, those are things that, and again, you talk about community schools, maybe there's some pilot money available. But some of the things you talked about, the governor will talk a lot about workforce. Certainly the legislators are going to talk a lot about workforce. It's been a major topic for them, certainly since he's been in. So I think there's some opportunity. And the more, more we're up there advocating, the better chance we are of pushing a full agenda.
There was one other one that I will also add. It's relative to special education and whether we could advocate for funding for a pilot of some sort to bring or expand our own special education programming. I know others want to also expand, but to the extent that we could pilot, it would have been another one that I would add on the list, by the way.
Okay. That would, that would sort of be a general category of specific asked, earmark kind of thing.
Chairperson, I don't, I guess, and or to the group, the process for determining what gets on the list is a wondering that I have.
So my thought for tonight, and again, I will say that this is definitely not my expertise or wheelhouse, so I take guidance from others as well. But I wasn't sure, Superintendent, if you could just give us, just summarize kind of your four buckets, just so that we can all kind of think of them right here as we sit. And then I think if we can then do an open discussion, maybe for the next few minutes here, and see if there's anything else that folks want to throw out to talk about. And then maybe just kind of what we talk about tonight does become our starting list of asks as we move forward, unless anyone thinks that there is a better way to move forward with that.
Oh. No one else. Christina, can you share screen?
Absolutely. We just
For the big, the big four is what I'm calling those, and then the other.
Paul just added a tab on. Hold on, let me just. There we go. So in the toolkit, when you see this big crosswalk, there's a tab here for us. So because as a starting point, I think Chairperson Hockenhull, you wanted that to start. And then the group can talk and kind of. So go ahead. Can you see the screen? Sorry.
A little bigger if you can. Right, so some of these are some that are carryover from previous advocacy. I think fully funding special education, right, excess cost grant is one that I think is shared all across the state probably. Special education, right, there's a factor relative to ECS, the formula, and increasing ECS funding to support that. That is also, I mean, I don't know how likely that will be, Pat and Nicole, from what you're hearing.
In terms of adding that as a factor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that if you're looking at maybe four priorities in terms of likelihood, I'm saying that's number 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Paul, I know, I mean, we've talked about the magnet tuition. We know that it wasn't forecasted for this year at the cap, but that will have a significant implication, right, for us in Hartford. That is one that I recommend. Tell me if you think otherwise, team, that we wholeheartedly advocate for, given the unique implication for us here. That they're gonna, right, move on it.
Yeah, so I think those two, if you take the making sure that they continue on the road to fully funding ECS and protect the magnet school tuition cap. Those are things that you're counting on, and the last thing you want is have those taken away, because that just blows such a hole in the budget. So I'd put those, significantly up the list.
If I can just add too on that, we just got our ECS projection for 25-26 today, because the state has an obligation to project it. And obviously the legislature can change it, but the current projection, I just want to, in terms of relative value of those two, right, for us, the full funding of ECS in 25-26 amounts to about $3 million more. That's what CSD is showing in their projection. If they were to eliminate the 58% cap on gen ed tuition, that would cost us, what did I put in here? 12 to 13 million more. And so in terms of relative merits, it would be much more devastating to us if they get rid of the 58% cap than it would be if they didn't fully fund ECS. Just the one other thing I'll add on this is, those two, I know those are the two more likely of the four. I just, in this column B, I label those as sustain existing policy, right? Like they already had adopted a plan to fully fund ECS by FY26. And my understanding, and we got guidance from CSDE on this, without a legislative change, the 58% cap remains. So really, in some ways, all we're fighting for is to keep what we already got, which is why we had the other two priorities, because, in some ways, rows 9 and 10 in this spreadsheet, that's like fighting to sustain what we already fought for. And, if we only focus on those two, we're not even fighting for anything else, anything new.
Right.
Stephen?
Could someone just briefly explain the cap on general education magnet tuition? Because I'm also serving on the CREC Council, and one of their priorities is to increase the state funding for magnet schools, because what they say is if the state doesn't increase payment, then they would have to pass that cost on to the sending districts, is how they kind of spin that finance situation. So, and I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, is that something that we should advocate for? Or is that like kind of playing into the system that exists right now that in some ways is harming us by allowing magnet schools to increase their tuition through state funding, and sort of by extension impacting us. So I know I just said a lot, but like, what is this cap on general education magnet tuition, and how does it relate to the idea of advocating for increased state funding for magnet schools?
I mean, I can try to speak to that. So I don't know where the 58% came from. As far as I know, that was a number picked out of a hat. But what I know is that when that was an attempt to give relief, right, to districts like ours, who were paying significant dollars in general ed tuition when our Hartford resident students went out to another magnet operator, be it CREC or Goodwin. And it's a funny bill in the sense that what it says is, again, I don't know where the 58% comes from, and Pat, if you do, feel free to jump in.
Well, it was the best. It was as high as they could get.
Gotcha. Well, so two things happened. So they passed a 58% cap, and they said the way it's written is, it was passed not last year but the year before, I believe. And what it says is you can't, you magnet operator cannot charge tuition for general ed students at a rate of more than 50%, 58% of what you charged in FY 23 or 24. I can't remember. I think 24. So it was a little funny too, because, right, they had a year notice. So some of the magnet operators bumped their rate so that last year that the cap applied to was higher. Right. They're not idiots. So it was this random fixed point in time that said, after, you can't charge more than 58% of what you charged in this particular specific fiscal year. But at the same time, there was also legislation passed last year, and this is where I'm going to get out of my depth very quickly, because we don't charge gen ed tuition, so we don't know these details very well. The state changed the funding formula for magnet operators, and so the state gave magnet operators more money per student than they had been previously. So the state did. I don't know whether they held them fully harmless, right? That's where I just don't know what the balance sheet looks like for CREC. I know that they changed the funding formula for magnet operators so that to compensate for the loss of the gen ed tuition. So Steve, to your point, I genuinely don't know if CREC took a loss when the cap went in, because I don't know how that shook out in terms of the loss in tuition they could charge us versus the amount they were receiving from the state. What I do know is as long as the cap is sustained, CREC has no ability to pass their cost on to us, because they're capped at 58% of what they charged in FY24. And so it wouldn't, like, that would be a conversation between the magnet operators and the state. But they don't right now, while the cap is in place, they have no ability to pass additional costs on to us for general education. Now, keep in mind, they could just put a bunch more kids in IEPs and then bill us.
The change that the state made for the magnets was to mitigate some of this. It was also part of additional funds for charters. So it was part of a big package. So your intuition is correct, Paul. It was part of a much, they were trying to mitigate what they had done for the cities, for the sending districts.
Paul, you're on mute. You're still talking.
Yeah, sorry. Pat, do you know how it shook out for places like CREC? I mean, I know that in the crosswalk tab, the RESCs are advocating to get rid of the cap.
Oh, sure.
So I'm assuming that means it didn't play out well for them.
It wasn't. I do not believe it was dollar for dollar. As I said, it was an attempt to mitigate it somewhat. It was part of a larger, funding package that included charter schools as well. And they were trying to help as many people as they could with what they had. And I would say the sending districts ended up doing, fairly well. But that was an issue that we've been talking about for a long time as well.
Sorry, Councilman Hernandez.
Oh, thank you. My apologies for my voice. Yesterday was a long day. So Paul, you said that magnet operators cannot charge more than the 58%, and there's no way for them to charge us more. But if today I'm charging you $100, I mean the cost is $100. I'm gonna charge the school district $58 because that's 58% of 100. But then next year, I'm gonna charge you. I'm gonna invoice $150. So now I'm gonna invoice the district $87, which is 58% of that. Isn't that a way of them getting more money by increasing their base cost? Like basically, you change the numerator. The denominator is the same, 58%, but you change the numerator. Is that a practice that we're seeing them do?
As I understand the legislation, it locks them at 58% of what they charged in FY24. So there's no ability to increase the base against which the 58% is applied. Again, all of that's subject to change, right? And I think that's the concern. Obviously, I think it was just up on the screen, right? But the RESCs are they're basically saying, if we don't get dollar for dollar what we lost with the cap, we want the cap to go away.
Thank you.
Is this the part of the meeting where we just throw out ideas, or that what we're doing? Because I think the first time we met, we talked about the what was it? What program was that, superintendent, with the getting teachers certified, and how the state has a 2.7 mandate, even though the rest of the country has a 2.5 GPA mandate, and we are actively, like, it's a state issue, not ours.
Relay,
The relay program.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, to summarize better than I just attempted to do, my understanding is the relay program is a national-wide program that allows currently non-certified staff to take time out of the work week to become certified. So they would still get paid during their normal work hours, instead of having to go out and do like an alternative program. But the state has a 2.7 GPA requirement when the relay program only requires a 2.5 GPA. And so I don't know who would be getting caught out of that, but I know that we have dismissed people, not us, but the relay program has made it so people can't participate, even though we know we have a statewide teacher shortage. So I know that's a state program or a state GPA requirement there.
And you're saying advocate for that. And I see
Yeah.
Nancy Williams is on the call.
Right.
One of the things, by the way, that we would add on that other list would be additional funding for relay. So it could be a twofer, right? A 2-for-1.
And that's especially good because I know Carol, I always want to call her Miss Gale because she was my teacher, but she definitely mentioned just non-financial ways in which we can help. Just because I highly doubt the legislature is always pleased to see us coming back to ask for more money. So that in itself might be a good way of getting some things done that can help lessen the load on current teachers that doesn't actually cost much.
I would encourage it not just to be for relay, because they only have approved for certification in certain areas. I would say we are also, I would encourage there be funding to provide scholarships for our non-certified staff who are pursuing programs at the traditional colleges as well, because we do have some partnerships that we are developing with them, and the cost is similar to relay, but it also provides opportunities for staff to earn certification in areas that relay doesn't currently have the ability to provide in Connecticut.
So maybe along those lines, if we're talking about workforce, did anybody else have anything workforce related that they wanted to raise for this discussion?
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
Thanks. I couldn't find my raised hand, but I got myself off. So one of the things that I know has come up in the past, and that I'm hearing about again from the union side, is the push to set a minimum salary for teachers. And that is definitely one that comes with cost. But it would help equalize the playing field in terms of the recruitment for Hartford Public Schools if the state set a minimum salary across the state. Like everybody had to then bring their salaries to, or leave their salaries at if they were already there, a particular level. They did this once before when there was a threat of a huge shortage, and it was very successful back in the late 80s. And so there's been a push to try and do something similar again now. It didn't pass the last time, but this is a budget year. And there's certainly been a lot of talk in the news about addressing the surplus funds and the fiscal guardrails and all of that. So it might be a good opportunity to push for something like that that would help to level the playing field for all districts. And certainly Hartford would benefit from that. Because the state would have to kick in money to help pay for that cost for districts to do it.
Yeah. Anything else on workforce? Along the lines of fiscal guardrails, Constanza did send me an email. She wasn't able to make it tonight, but she did say she's particularly interested in seeing if this group would be willing to advocate for more funding to be made available through the modification of fiscal guardrails, and whether we could advocate to our delegation to support this and invest in equitable school funding and special education in particular. So it sounds like special education is on here. But we don't want to raise the fiscal guardrails, as and it's definitely been in the news. So just, I'm not sure, Patrick, if you have any thoughts on that and where that's headed. Sorry, Patrick, I don't know if you heard me, but around the fiscal guardrails.
I don't know if you heard that behind me. That was Hartford's finest going by in a fire truck, and I couldn't. Questions on guardrails. Did you want kind of just an update on? I mean, so our delegation, I think, will be looking to revise, alter the guardrails. I think we need to encourage them to do that throughout the session. The volatility cap. They perhaps going to change the formula, how that is applied. You know, the spending cap. The argument now is the spending cap is calculated this year will increase spending by about 900 million to $1 billion. But there's going to be pushback on both these things. The governor has not tipped his hand fully yet where he's going to be. He's going to let this play out. Republicans are very, very much saying the spending cap works. You're going to get another $1 billion, and they want to keep the volatility cap the way it is. But that will be something that this group, we will, be working with you, talking points that it's something. But I do think you will have a lot of support from your delegation on this.
Thank you for that. Stephen?
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in this area. Partly because it's not only advocating for the changes that we want to see, but also applying pressure about how to make them, which I think this moment calls for, and there's a great opportunity here with the surplus from these fiscal guardrails. And I'm curious about strategies for trying to get more pressure and support for some of those policy changes to make them easier to pass. One opportunity that I've seen and named before and wanted to do some work on but haven't yet done the legwork for is specifically reaching out to rural boards of ed and their legislative delegations that are more likely to be represented by Republicans who might at first resist revising some of these guardrails, but if we can make it an education issue, like these rural boards of ed are in a similar position in some ways as some of the urban boards of ed of wanting to spend more money on education, but just not having the funds. And I see an opportunity there to apply pressure, not just on our delegation, but do some organizing and get some of these more rural boards of ed to put pressure on their delegations as well for the sake of education, really make this an education issue and lean on, what we know about the inequities in the state and the way that it's impacting learners across the state, young people across the state, to make some investments for the sake of Connecticut's future. I just think that we can't pass up that opportunity to really put pressure and not let the state continue to sit on all this money.
Thanks, Stephen. I really like that idea. I'm happy to work with you on that, or as capital strategies can help too. I think that would be really great. Any other? Oh, sorry.
Just on the guardrails, and appreciate Stephen's input. I just put into the chat. I don't know if anyone I know this is an interesting topic for everyone. When you have the time, I spent the better part of Sunday reading it twice. Is the Yale Tobin Center deep dive into the fiscal guardrails impact in specific to Connecticut, obviously. And I think it's well done. And actually, the former mayor, Luke Bronin, was one of the people driving this study and contributing to it. So it's the link to that is in the chat. Not for you to look at it now, but something you may want to review in your freer time.
Thank you. Are there any other topics to lift for the more overarching topics for our upcoming session we wanted to talk about? Okay. As you think of some, as your other groups that you're involved in, as things come up, please, reach out to myself or Christina. We can circulate it to the larger group as well to make sure that we're all working together towards the goal of improving our students' futures. That's at the end of the day why we are all here. We all want to see better futures for our kids here in Hartford. So definitely appreciate everyone's input. Patrick, was there anything else, any parting thoughts before tomorrow starts, before we move forward with any further discussions?
No, I don't think so, unless Nicole has something, but I do want to thank everyone and over the last month, Paul, Christina, Superintendent, Jennifer, Pedro have been very helpful in organizing this toolkit and getting you really organized. It's been very helpful to us in planning our advocacy for you. So thank you for that.
Superintendent, anything else from your side?
We're getting ready to align this work with our budget process. So I know that at some point we'll be ready to also inform community as we talk about building out a budget and the process for that. So it's great timing.
Thank you. So again, please stay in touch. I don't think we have other meetings on the schedule. We'll get some more on there just so that we continue to stay in touch. But please don't hesitate to reach out, and I genuinely look forward to working with everyone on this call going forward in any way we can to move this legislative things forward, as well as, our regular conversations and just generally doing, making Hartford a better place for our kids to be educated. So again, grateful for everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care.